conservative and I guess, well, Republicans, libertarian, more conservative-leaning people, they're busy. And our political opponents are the ones, like you just described it, are willing to, be advocates. They're willing to do that work for little or no pay, and they're willing to engage in a process that allows them to have a voice, because ultimately what they're looking for is power and a say in the process, and not necessarily financial return. Not to say that they don't have long-term ambition for that, but
hello, fellow Alaskans. Thank you all for tuning in here today. For joining us here on Facebook Live. We are with Anchorage Dying, and a representative that is from out of Oregon who has joined us all together today to have a small discussion about is Anchorage dying? Is there something that we can do to help save it? Just looking towards the future, I wanted to include you in my own Facebook Live feed today of this Zoom call going on today.
You're watching me fumble over myself here, trying to get sentences out of my mouth. There are people that are great orators, that are great thinkers, and some of us are just regular people. And I think the process needs us as much as it needs those other people as well. So
I think regular people are the ones that are really going to change and fix the system. I think business owners are the ones. Business and veterans are my primary focus with politicians. I like both. I think their leadership abilities in both are very valuable. I have represented a 30-year Coast Guard veteran. Just recently was elected senator up in Alaska, and so I've represented truck drivers. And recently, also elected senator in Alaska. I think that it really just comes down to the individual. I don't think that anybody is like particularly set to be a politician. I think that the politician job is a term limit job, in my opinion. It should be, and you should go do your job. You should help this society, and you should go back to your job.
And I'm partially there with you. I think that's my plan. I would imagine right now, if I project into the future, that I will term limit myself, but I do have problems with the bureaucracy and the intellectual property and how that's transferred through the system. Because right now, if you put people in term limits, then the people that have the intellectual knowledge in that property are the staff and the lobby. For a dangerous predicament too, in that someone that isn't accountable to the electorate is the one carrying all the power and knowledge and authority. So there's no one.
You make a good point. I've never really heard anybody make a counter to that before, but your counter actually makes a lot of sense. I do see some value and experience, and you're not going to strip the CEO of a bank or a board of a bank just because they made a bad decision. Sometimes, but most of the time that's not how it goes. So I can see that the experience being a big piece for sure.
Well, I'm 43 and I'm in the prime earning years of my life, and this job pays about $30,000. So I don't think you have to be too concerned about people being lifers in state legislatures, but at the national level, where I think congressional delegates are making $175.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's definitely going back to some Alaska people. There's two. Murkowski, she's a senator, Republican, awful. And Don Young, in my opinion, he's okay, but he's been there for 40 years. You know what I mean? It's in my opinion, you can't possibly represent your state if you've been doing a job for that long. You have $1 million in your campaign coffers. You just at some point you stop caring. As much as you want to, I just think you do. That's my opinion. But on the state level, going back, we're talking about the present day of Portland and how that's going. And so if I left in July, and during that time period, the courthouse thing had not happened. So can you tell me a little bit about how that transpired, or what kind of involvement or what kind of information you have around that topic?
In terms of the attacks on the courthouse?
Yes, sir. Just in regards to the way that Portland and the way the city and the management, and the council, or don't really have a council. They have elected officials. Is that it?
They have city commissioners that ultimately, not in the same sense of a city council or county commissioners. They serve a really odd function where they actually become almost department heads. I mean, they're a layer of management. They're not a department head, but they are assigned agencies, so to speak. One commissioner is in charge of transportation, and another commissioner, oversees another aspect of government. But what it really became, at least to me, what I saw was very much an anti-Trump, anti-federal government movement. And so the courthouse kind of became a symbol of that government. And so Trump, of course, wanted to weigh in with law enforcement to protect a federal asset, which I absolutely thought was appropriate for him to do. And of course, then the public and specifically the Antifa and the Black Lives Movement folks that were amenable to using violence and rioting and looting to make their point, found that to be their target. And they tried to not just burn the building, but I think they burned Trump in effigy. They made quite a spectacle of it. And it was hard to watch. And I think, the challenge for me right now, especially this week, we had a protest in December in Salem, and people break into the Capitol when the Capitol had been closed. You have to take all this stuff into context, right? And you have to capture it all in this conversation, because any single kind of isolated topic doesn't do justice to the conversation. And so you look at what happened in the Capitol in D.C., it really stemmed from a group of folks that were so fed up with what was happening in Portland and what was happening in Salem, what was happening in Minnesota, what was happening in Wisconsin, like all over the nation. These people burned their way to the Capitol, and they ultimately went to the Capitol, right? And they had a massive movement in the Capitol, and they tried to demonstrate, and they used violence, and they used fire and other means and spray paint and bear spray and pepper spray and all that, and they show up and they're clad in makeshift armor, and so there was a group of people sitting at home watching this, saying we're a country of laws, we're a nation of laws, we need law and order, we need rule of law, and they watched all these massive news media outlets condone the activity. It was okay because those people needed to make a point. It was okay. I remember Cuomo on CNN saying specifically, like, it wasn't just their right, it was their obligation. Like, they were in a moment where they had to make a stand, and they had to use their voice, and they had to make their point any way they needed to. And so he was okay with it. And again, to compare and contrast that with his coverage, a specific man, I know I'm talking about one guy, but it's this hypocrisy of then we can look at what happened on the 6th in D.C., and it was absolutely wrong, and they were there for all the wrong reasons, and I get where that group was frustrated, but I'll tell you, hopefully, there's a lot more people like me who saw all the violence and condemned it all. It wasn't right when it was in Portland, it wasn't right when it was in Minnesota, it wasn't right in D.C.
Well, speaking of
Salem.
I definitely want to touch on the Capitol thing, because that's a topic within itself in a lot of ways, but I want to cover, going back to that time period, I want to kind of look at the mayor's response in Portland. Yeah. Initially, what his response was, because I distinctly remember, and I have photographic evidence of him getting pepper sprayed,
right,
which was rather hilarious. I enjoyed this. This was one of the most entertaining moments of 2020, I would say. Seeing his face, he went down to join the protesters, and he got pepper sprayed because he was with the protesters. And so, it didn't go well for him then. And then later, I believe, a week or two ago, I think it was a week ago, he came out and retracted his statement about trying to work with Antifa, and said that he called them out by name for the first time, and then condemned them for their violent activities and the fact that they weren't willing to work with me. It's yeah, no kidding. We were saying this from the very beginning, and they've ignored that.
Yeah.
And then he got reelected, and now he's come out and called them out by name and is trying to address the problem. So tell me a little bit about that whole retraction as a politician. How would you feel comfortable coming out making a statement like that, and then later retracting, or getting pepper sprayed, and later having to retract that statement? Is that something that would be a becoming of a politician that should be representative of mayor for the city?
Well, first I got to get you on to Corinthians 13, where it talks about love and what love is, and love does not take delight in other people's misery and misfortune. So, we shouldn't delight in Ted Wheeler getting pepper sprayed. But no, it was interesting, right? It was a very telling moment of what that movement was. He tried to go down, and as you put it, he tried to embrace them and say, I'm one of you. Here I am. I agree with all of your political points, and let's do this together, and let's do it in a nonviolent way, and we can move the needle. And they pepper sprayed him and said, you're not one of us. Like, you're part of the establishment, you're part of the problem. And so, yeah, to watch him shift, and politicians, right, we pay attention to who votes for us. We try to recognize the winds of change, and we try to adapt if we're trying to get elected, right? If we're truly trying to represent our constituency, then we need to be able to identify and understand our constituency. And he thought he understood his constituency, and then he watched as I believe she was a socialist member of Antifa that ended up being his opponent in the final runoff of the mayor's race, and he watched her almost win. And I think it was a huge wake-up call for him as to what he was up against, and I'm thankful that the people of Portland kept Mayor Wheeler there, because I truly believe the alternative was a lot worse. So I don't know if I have insight into Mayor Wheeler's life other than he was going through some serious issues. I can tell you, I was texting him encouragement. His mom was fighting terminally ill with.
Yeah, I definitely don't mean to attack him personally.
Yeah, no.
I look at character and policy, and and I even in politics when I'm addressing other people and attacking them with attack ads. My attack ads are purely on their policies and character. It's just like, if you say you're going to do something and you don't do it, that's a problem. If you say you're going to help a group or you're not going to help or whatever, it's just the point of making a statement, standing by your statements. It seems really simple. But many politicians, as you know, have a really hard time being honest and being straightforward with voters. And I think voters are tired of that. Truthfully, I think that's the end of that era of politics, in my opinion. And I think we're much more into transparency. We want to know what people's beliefs are. Not so much on the religious side of things, but like, what policies are you going to enact? What things are you going to do to actually help people?
I think transparency is fine so long as it's authentic. I think of elected officials can get to the point of oversharing, right? To build a false sense of trust. And so, I can tell you that I am told things that I absolutely keep in confidence. There are things that people have told me that I'm not going to share with anybody. And you don't get to know every thought in my head, and you don't get to know every conversation I have. What you do get to know is my voting record. Like, if I take a public stance on something, you absolutely have a right to know that. You don't necessarily get to know every thought in my head that led me to that decision, but you get to know the outcome. And, I would hope, at least in my case, where I am, representing about 70,000 people, I want them to know what my rationale was. But at the same time, there is a line there, a threshold at which, I owe you versus you have the right to versus I have an obligation to, all those things are nuanced. And so, it's an important difference, though. Authentic transparency is really what we're after.
And I want to be respectful of your time. I love to do this again. All 2021, there's going to be an opportunity to jump on and do these. Soon I'll be down there and we can do it more in person. So hopefully. But what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about the future of Oregon and kind of where you're planning, what kind of support that you need as a politician. Because like I said, I'll be down there soon. And that you're the type of person that I'd be willing to put my support behind. And Joe down there, he's got my support on various whatever things he's working on. He's the one that kind of brought us together and this whole put this whole thing together. And I strongly encourage more and more people to get involved. And I'd like to hear your opinions on that particular area, just kind of pushing forward.
So I will tell you, one of the sad things with the way lines are drawn in districts in any state, in any legislative district, some seats are safer than others, right? And so we target seats where we feel like there's an opportunity to win, and you can have the best candidate. Christine Drazen, who's our current leader, lives in Canby and has a relatively rural / suburban district. We could move her downtown Portland and there's no chance she could win. And yet, I'm telling you, she's probably the finest legislator in the state. And so, part of the challenge is overcoming the current lines. As you know, we had the census in 2020. We have redistricting in 2021. I sit on that committee, looking forward to being part of that conversation. I've sat in the last 3 days through NCSL, National Conference of State Legislators training on redistricting, and oh my gosh, this is going to be a complicated issue. I had no idea how complex and how regulated this process is. So I am looking forward to it, but it's going to be a challenge. So we started 3 years ago when I first got into this, engaging in a process of how do we identify candidates. We look at what the Democrats do. They've got a whole apparatus. Specifically, they've got a group called Emerge here in Oregon that they put candidates through. It's candidate training. And then, they've had the governor's mansion for 33 years. They own every agency. They can appoint people to commissions. They can provide opportunity that we just can't provide. And so when you talk about going through and understanding what it takes to be a candidate and then what it means to run for office, that's about where we have to stop. They can plug you into an agency. They can give you practical, real-world experience. They can appoint you to a commission or put you on a board of some sort to give you practical resume-building experience. And so we're working on that. We started a group called Evergreen Oregon PAC. We called it Evergreen for multiple reasons. Evergreen never changes, right? They're always green. They're everlasting, and they never stop. And, for the last however many years, Republicans in Oregon have stood up a campaign arm after session and run through the campaign cycle and then eliminated their political side of the workload and moved into policy. And so all those people that were out running campaigns and part of the apparatus of training and recruiting and fundraising then were in the building doing policy research and helping the elected officials get through the session. And so for the first time in, I don't know how long, but I don't think it's existed for over 20 years, we've stood this Evergreen Oregon PAC up to full-time have a political director that is recruiting, training the recruits, fundraising, and that we don't stop the campaign side of things. That we still have a political arm even when we're trying to do policy work. And so I think that's the biggest difference that I could point to. And then, buy-in. There's so many people that love Oregon, that call Oregon home, and they're watching government regulation, restrictions on their liberties and freedom increase. And right hand in hand with that increase is the increase in taxable liability. And so they're paying more and they're getting less. We're still in the bottom decile of performance in education, and yet we're in the top decile of investment and teacher compensation. And so those two things shouldn't be contrary like that. They shouldn't be, they should be correlated, right? I mean, if you're paying more than anybody else is in the nation into your education system, you should expect that same return in performance, and we're not.
Yeah,
so.
It's actually really good that you brought that up because it's like we talked about earlier, the school board and local assembly races. You're getting something to drink, Jim. I'm gonna get something after this. So after I'm done talking. But the really nice thing is as COVID kind of progresses, I think that it's kind of weird. It brings us. It's in one way. It brings us in closer together. We're able to go across state lines, discuss problems that are existing across multiple states, and like talk about potential solutions and ways for people to get involved and to meet representatives like yourself that are actually out there fighting for things. So I really appreciate your time. Again, it's huge. It really is. It's a big deal, and it's very valuable. And thank you. But when we go into Governor Kate, is that Kate Brown, right? So it's like, tell me a little bit about her, and then I want to give a gentleman, a news journalist from Alaska, a chance to ask you a question, and at least one or two questions. I don't know if he's. I'm sure he can come up with some things, but I just mostly because he's on the ground, and if you want to see a microcosm of Portland, or a microcosm of Seattle, Anchorage is a great example. It's small. This is how I always explain it to people, is that even though I don't live there anymore, I look at it as like target one, primarily because it's small enough to fix. And so there's only 200,000 people there, so the issues are still pretty small. Issues in Portland are not small. Issues in Seattle are not small. So, like, if you would be so kind, let me ask you one question, and then we'll jump to that. So this is coming from Facebook. It said, "Sir, what is your take on the overall climate in politics?" And as I think he means on the national scale. And then, what are our elected officials to do to bring people together? Because there's obviously a major divisiveness, and that's only being perpetrated by both the media and most of the political class.
So I had the opportunity, I had a constituent post a pretty lengthy kind of introspective reflection on their life and where they were at today. And so I engaged, I knew her when she was a teacher in the local public school district. And so we're friends, and I reached out to her and just started asking her a couple questions. And she identifies as independent. She doesn't have a party affiliation, so she's truly non-affiliated. She called herself independent. But, the disenfranchisement with either party is deep within that center. And I don't think that's going away anytime soon because of the news media and even social media. Like, I don't care what the media outlet is. Right now, everybody's right, and anybody that doesn't agree with them is wrong. And it's black and white, and it's you versus me, and it's tribalism, and we've all gone to our corners, and we come out swinging. And the reality is, and this came up in the conversation I was having with Desiree today, was if you put your ideal of what you want the world to look like on the table, and you drew it as a map, I think I would look at the map and recognize at least 80% of it as things I want too. We want quality education. We want the opportunity for upward mobility. We want people to have financial freedom. We want quality health care that's affordable. Like, all the things that we want are the same, and the difference is how we achieve those outcomes. And I think we've gotten so focused on the how that we've forgotten that it's truly about the what. And until we can get back there, I don't have the answer for you in terms of how we get there, other than just to start to listen more, right? Stop. Listen to what someone just said. Quit formulating your thought. Stop and listen to what they're saying. Digest it. Take a second. It's okay to stop and think. It is wonderful to stop and consider what that person just said. Even if it's an argument you've heard 100 times before. Stop and recognize that it's personal to this person, that they have the thought that they have. And don't try and move them off of their position. Don't think that the reason that they have the position is because that they don't understand the position. And if you want to get into my biggest pet peeve, that's it right there. In Salem, I can't tell you how many times one of my colleagues will, preach at me until they're blue in the face because they think I don't understand. No, I've heard all the data. I've heard all your science. I've evaluated everything, and I've landed on a different conclusion. And I think that's okay. I went to one training that I would point to as well. It was the Western Legislative Academy put on by the Council of State Governments, and it was representatives from all over the West Coast. I think we had Hawaii, Alaska, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, Nevada, New Mexico, and Arizona. I think California was the only state that wasn't there. And the whole idea was learning to do the job better. How to engage with your constituents, how to listen, how to understand, how to be a professional, how to manage your time. It was mostly about just the qualities that good legislators have. There was one moment, though, in the 3 days that we were together that we actually did talk policy. And we didn't debate policy, but we did an exercise where we started off in a room, and there were about 30 of us, and he would, the leader, the facilitator, would pose a question. And then he would have you move to one end of the room or the other based on where you stood on that particular topic, or anywhere in between. And so the first one that he brought up was bicycle helmets. And he said, now, if you believe that no one should have to wear a bicycle helmet, go stand on that wall. And if you believe that everyone should have to wear a bicycle helmet, go stand on that wall. A couple of us were acting like we wanted a door or a window on this side of the room, right? Like, I can't get over here far enough, buddy. Like, don't tell me to wear my seatbelt. Don't tell me to wear a bicycle helmet. And so he called on me, and he's like, and he said that. He's like, you, sir, that look like you're looking for a door or a window, like, why are you on that wall? And I just said, liberty and freedom. And then he pointed to the other side of the room, and there was a woman there, a legislator, and he said, why are you standing on that wall? And she said, well, before I was in this job, I was an ER nurse, and I have seen some people that were victims of accidents where they weren't wearing a bicycle helmet, and I just think everyone should have to wear one. We got into the nuance, right? Sir, where do you picture people riding their bike? Ma'am, where do you have concerns? And so you start thinking, oh man, a person on a 55-mile-an-hour 2-lane highway, will you change the bike to a motorcycle? And you start to have these conversations, and the further you get, you can start to see where you can gravitate away from your position if you've got to find a compromise with this person, right? And if you start to think about what's the best public policy, is it truly what I think it is, or is there some way, if we can collectively talk about this and figure out the nuance of some of these things, that it doesn't have to mean that I'm right all the time, that we can actually find some compromise. And I think if we could just have more conversations like that, where we can sit and look.
Thank you all for joining us here tonight. I am with Is Anchorage Dying, and a representative from out of Oregon, and we're discussing the similarities between Anchorage and Oregon. He's kind of just giving a good background between the difference between here and there. Continue to stay tuned. I'm going to turn the volume back up right now.
But I heard there was some kind of LGBTQ book out in Oregon that's causing trouble. And I don't know anything about the details of it, but I heard that. Yeah, that seems to be a common trend. First it's the assembly or the city council or the city managers, and then it's or school board first. But the point is, like, there's obviously an agenda, among the local governments, and I can speak to that just because of the type of people that are doing the job, right? So if you hire a plumber to do plumbing at your house, you hire him to do a very particular job, right? And so if he came in and tried to cook, I'd have a problem with that. So like the point is like you're hiring, they are running for positions that they're not qualified to do, and they're running for the wrong reasons. So one of the things that I see a lot of people running for nowadays is to push social agendas, not to actually fix the city. And so they're trying to like change the city or try to fix their racism or fix their versus actually like trying to manage the city. And they're willing to run the businesses out of town, run the businesses into the ground, change the entire culture of the city just because they deem it racist or sexist or misogynistic or whatever adjective that they want to add to it. But the point is, like, I would like to get your feedback on a little bit area, but I don't have too much time, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to Bert from Alaska. I'm going to go ahead and let him jump on. Bert, are you available, sir? You there? Hey, Bert? Politadick, are you there, sir? Nope. Not coming through. Must have stepped away. Well, Joe, do you have anything you'd like to ask to move the Q&A session a little further?
Yeah, I kind of...
Sure thing. One time you had me step away.
I kind of want to hit on the DC thing. So I've been talking to a lot of constituents here in Gresham, and with the fact that a lot of it seemed it was on the Patriots side of things, and there's several people here that want to step out of the local party, the Multnomah County Party here in Multnomah County. Are you seeing any opposition as far as constituency goes to get involved with a party around your area or involved in the legislation? And is that affecting you guys? You're probably not recruiting right now for the future candidacies, but have you talked to any? Are you?
Oh yeah.
Good.
Yeah, we started. Interestingly, we started Wednesday. We were sitting at my kitchen table with our political strategist and our executive director, and we had what was going on in the Capitol playing in the background, and it was a difficult day. I've had multiple people email me, you can imagine, and saying, I'm a moderate voter. I voted for you, but I don't know if I can vote for a Republican ever again because they identified what was happening in D.C. with our party and our ideology, and that's where I go back to what I was trying to articulate earlier, which is you can't talk about D.C. without talking about what happened in Portland 9 months ago. They are linked, and whether we like it or not, one led to the other. And I'm not trying to make excuses or condone any of it, but I'm saying that one was a determining factor on the other one taking place. And so, how do you win people over? I fortunately can tell you that a couple of the people that have reached out to me included their phone number, and I'm so thankful for that because it is a hard email to write back to articulate the depth of understanding you want someone to have when you then tell them what your position is. And so fortunately I was able to have a couple phone conversations and I think open people's eyes that you can't broad brush any political party through one event or one moment in time or even one politician. And to be honest with you, it'd be like painting Christianity by Christians and not by Jesus Christ. There is a way to evaluate these things, and so I think that we'll get there. The next election, for us, is 2 years away. I think this will be a topic. I don't think this is just going to go away. I think this will be something we continue to talk about and debate and try and learn and grow from. But the answer has to be that violence is never acceptable. You can't take up arms against law enforcement after, in your last breath, saying that you are pro-law enforcement. And you can't put those people that are just there to enforce a law. If you disagree with the law, there's a constitutional way to go about changing the law. And there's a method and a process for that. And right now, especially in Oregon, you can imagine the frustration of conservatives in Oregon as both chambers are ruled by a supermajority, and we have a liberal progressive governor, and now a very liberal progressive secretary of state, and a treasurer, and a bully commissioner, and all of them are pretty left-leaning. And so if you're conservative in Oregon, you want traditional values, and you see the world through a Christian worldview, these are difficult times. And the only way that we're going to move the needle is to get more people bought into our ideology and our way of problem solving. And some of that's on guys like me, right? We can't just be the party and know. We've got to have a brand, and we've got to have a message of how we're going to actually affect change to make people's lives better. And if you rewind 4 years, what Trump did brilliantly in 2016 was he connected with people that felt disenfranchised. He took those people that used to have factory jobs that were either unemployed or employed at a lower wage, and he told them that there was a way to get that life back. And then he delivered on a lot of those promises. Like Trump, the president, policy-wise, did some wonderful things, and I'm not going to talk about him personally or anything like that. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but if you look at fundamentally what he did for those people in the Rust Belt, he delivered on promises that he made to them, and we need to come up with a solution here in Oregon that gets a lot of these disenfranchised people back to a place that they want to be.
Yeah, I agree with you. Joe, I don't mean to cut you in. I just want to I agree 100% on the economics aspect and getting people back to work. I think what should be a major focus for all politicians at this point is just trying to fix these lockdowns, fix these the businesses being closed. Question though, I believe Bert, are you there, sir?
I'm here now. If you can hear me.
Yeah, we got you. So, Bert, I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself in a second. I just want to ask the representative one last question, just in regards to what we were talking about. So, in regards to like the long range of the fixing issues, when you're looking at your as a political insider, what one thing would you encourage people to do, with redistricting coming up, elections coming up, it may be a little bit far out, but getting involved now is more important than waiting, I would say. And so I just want to make sure that we get it on tape and have you emphasize how important it is to get involved as soon as possible. And help your local politicians, and help your school board, and help your assembly, and help people, because otherwise, it's your responsibility as a voter and as a person, in my opinion.
Well, I think, one of the core tenets of our ideology is individual responsibility, right? And I always go back, if it is to be, it's up to me. Like, I don't go to the Capitol as a Republican and not expect to pass legislation. Like, I go there with the intent of moving my legislation through the building, and I've done it. It can be done. You have to build coalitions. My chief of staff hates this analogy, but I always say that, the Capitol building is like Survivor. We're voting people off the island all the time. You got to change your alliance on a daily basis to get your bill through, and then at the end of the day, you want people to vote for you for the $1 million. So you have to maintain relationships, and you got to do that in the building. But before that, you've got to have a coalition to help you get there. And so whether it's forming your kitchen cabinet with your friends and family and neighbors who are going to help you get elected, or donating your $50 tax-free credit that you get in the state of Oregon to someone like me, so that I can go help someone else get elected. Again, I live in a district where I literally didn't spend any money in my last campaign cycle. We sent out 2 mailers that were, fundraising mailers, and we used most of our money to invest in the caucus, to invest in other candidates like Joe Dealers, to try and get people elected throughout the state. And so we targeted a few districts, and of the 3 that we really targeted that we thought we had a chance to win, we won 2, and we lost the other one by 84 votes. We will continue on that strategy, and we gave a return on our investment for those that we asked for financial contributions. The fundraising was successful this year, and then we won a House seat for the first time in 10 years. So we got to build on that, but there is hope that things can change. I mean, if you think the legislature in Oregon, 16 years ago, for the previous 10 years, had been Republican. We're not that far removed from a time when Republicans had control of the House. We've not had control of the gubernatorial mansion for 33 years, but we've had an opportunity to be the check and balance in the House and the Senate, and we need to get back there, because I think most Oregonians really do, in their heart of hearts, believe that we are better off when we are balanced and when there is that check and balance. So we've got to have the message that connects with people on the ground. All politics does end up being local. Again, you can't move me from here to a deep blue seat in Portland and think that I'm just so fantastic and colors and rainbows and unicorns that I'm going to win. So it's finding the right candidate in the right district and helping them succeed. And of course, it really does start this year with redistricting. We've got to get some decent lines drawn and give people a chance to be in some competitive seats.
I know we're drawing on here a little bit, and I want you to get to the last guy, but
okay.
I want you to touch real quick, Daniel, on Measure 107. I had mentioned that to you before. I want you to let the people know exactly how that affects the individual contributions to candidacy when that gets passed.
Yeah, so the reality is it's unknown at this point. So basically, the legislature told the people to tell the legislature to figure it out. So we referred something to the ballot. The ballot measure basically said we want the legislature to come up with a plan to define campaign contributions and limits thereof. And so we've not decided that yet. That is probably the second major fight. I think redistricting is going to be the big determining fight. But right there on its heels is the campaign finance reform. Campaign finance is frustrating because, people think that, if you tell me, let's just say, for an example, that an expensive race in the state of Oregon is $1 million in the House, let's just say that you say you can't spend more than $100,000. Guess what? $1 million is still going to be spent on that race. You're only going to allow the candidate to control $100,000 of the voice of what they say about themselves. But the other $900,000 is still going to be raised by other 501c4s and other entities that can do political work and that can fundraise, and they'll buy the ad, and we call that dark money. Now, when you talk about dark money, people hate that, and yet they just voted for something that ultimately creates and endorses that method of electing people. So, we have challenges. A lot of it is making sure that people are informed. Here in Oregon, we have the challenge of badly written ballot titles and badly written poorly written ballot explanations. And then, of course, anybody with $750 can buy their advocacy to the yay or nay side of that thing and completely misrepresent what the ballot measure is all about. So it's going to be a fight. I don't know what it's going to be yet, Joe, because we haven't even had the discussion in Salem. But it is something that you're going to want to closely watch over the next 6 months.
All right, Joe, you got anything else, sir?
You gonna let Bert take a whack at me?
Yeah.
Nope. Yeah. Let Bert go. He's been waiting.
All right, that sounds good. All right, so Joe is from Oregon, and our representative that we have as a special guest today is also from Oregon. Bert is from Alaska. He's a news journalist, and so he just recently started commercializing his news. And I believe he has similar issues and similar problems that are up in Alaska, up in Anchorage in particular. I'm really looking forward to see the compare and contrast between the two. So, Bert, if you wouldn't mind, sir.
Well, we just started what we have as our 32nd legislative session begins here on the 19th of January. And as of this morning, the House Majority representatives got together and they had a committee to discuss the proposed budget of the state and capital budget today. And it was full of nothing but doom and gloom. Their only solutions is tax, 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 and we'll find more ways to continue to tax you. And then their other solution we have our permanent fund dividend here, and their other solution is just to continue to keep tapping that, either reduce it or eliminate it completely and allow it to be just government's way of being able to fund things. I know you there in Oregon don't have the advantage of a permanent fund dividend to be able to tap in as unlimited resource to pay for government spending. A lot of the similarities that I'm seeing, we have it here is we got the highest Medicaid costs in the nation. We're triple what it is the rest of the nation to be able to afford what we're doing here. And we have more people wanting to be homeless, or I shouldn't say homeless as in living on the street, but in the poverty and welfare section of our state. 1/3 of Alaska is literally registered as living off of one form of welfare or another here in our state. And then they've come in as a legislator yourself. Would you be proposing to your constituents, when you look at the population base, 1/2 of Alaska is at the poverty level. 25% of Alaska's working class actually works and makes a living that's above poverty level. So 25%, if there's an income tax instilled here, what they're trying to do, we're going to find ourselves having to pay the bulk of the taxes that are out there, because those that are living at the welfare level aren't going to be required to pay any income tax because they don't have no income. Those living right at the poverty level are not going to pay no income tax because they're at the poverty level. So that leaves the 25% that's above that margin that's going to pay for it. When you look at it, and the reason why I say there's a 50-25, the last 25% is our 65 and above population that we have in Alaska, the retirement class. We just increased, population census came out this year. We decreased by 4,000 more Alaskans than what we had here living here last year. Bulk of that left the heart of Anchorage. The only growth for the next continuous year was here in the valley, the Mat-Su Valley. We keep breaking records by how many people we keep increasing by for the last few years. But the overall loss has been leaving the state. Our aging population of 65 and older grew by 4% of our population this year. And our working class population decreased by 1%. Are you guys there seeing any sort of similarity between the homeless population increases with where your poverty level class lives at versus where your middle and upper income comes from? And then throw your retirement into the mix?
Yeah, so our homelessness issue, I would say, is more tied to substance and mental health, substance abuse and mental health. I don't think it follows, any class guideline whatsoever. I think literally it is a substance abuse and mental health issue. When we legalize pot, and now Measure 110 has legalized other substances with the promise to take, other revenues and invest it into substance abuse treatment programs, that's been our biggest problem. but I will say, so I met Natasha von Inhofe at one of these trainings, and
my
and was able
sympathies.
to. What's that?
My sympathies. Go ahead.
I didn't know much about Alaska's budget, and I will say this: she had a solid understanding of your budget, and it was interesting because, of course, we don't have a similar program where anybody gets paid to live in the state of Oregon. So that whole conversation, I think, was taking place about the time in 2018. There was someone running for governor, I think, that wanted to do something different with that budgetary line item, and so there was a big fight at the time. Anyway, here in Oregon, obviously, we have a balanced budget, constitutional requirement, and so the challenge is, a legislature with a penchant for spending. Our budget is significantly greater. We have out-trended any CPI increase or inflation increase over the last 20 years. We've grown the budget in excess of 46% beyond growth of inflation or any consumer price index. So, we're spending more today. We have an 11-year-old temporary tax on each bottle of liquor, just to tell you how temporary taxes can be. And so you will hear a lot about the camel and the camel's nose in the tent and all sorts of things as it comes to discussions over tax in the state of Oregon. We don't have we do now. We have a corporate activity tax, which has given us a sales tax, so to speak, and not a traditional sales tax, but a tax on revenue instead of profitability, or a tax on consumption, which would be a point of sale tax. It is a gross receipts tax, which, two things happened in the 2019 legislative cycle that were direct opposition to what the voters had just said. The voters voted down Measure 97, which was a gross receipts tax, and then they voted down driver's licenses for all, and then the legislature with their Democrat supermajority said, screw the voters, they voted us in, so clearly we have a mandate as a supermajority to do whatever the heck we want. And so they increased with a corporate activity tax about $2.8 billion in new tax that was going towards education, because that's always the thing that people want to fund, right? You put the kids out in front and say this is to fund education. Of course, I was proud to stand up on the House floor and say, bring the education funding package here now. Let's vote on that first, and we, as a body, can fully fund education, and then you have to live within the budget for everything else that you want to spend. But we're willing to invest in education without adding a $2.8 billion tax to the system. And so,
is your funding for education? You can actually line item and say X amount of the budget every year is going to be able to go towards the X amount of the taxes, will pre-appropriate and say this money can be there, because ours goes into one big pot, and they cannot designate who gets what until they sit down and into the rooms and sit down with their committees and start arguing about who they want to give it to. You brought up Natasha von Inhofe. I just want to carry on with her just a little bit. Her family owns the Rasmussen Foundation here in the state of Alaska, and it is one of the biggest for-profit, non-profit organizations that we have. And to find that she was sitting on the Senate Finance as the chair, distributing all the money that went directly into her family's foundation and pocketbooks there. But the more along the lines of the reason why I stopped you was I just wanted to know, is in comparison, does all of your tax revenue just go into one general pot, and then each item is not designated, or can you say we're going to put this tax on this item and it's going to go for education only? In Alaska, we can't do that.
So we have multiple buckets of money, right? We have general fund money, we have lottery money, we have other funds, which other funds are all the fees and licensing charges that are dispersed throughout the state that aren't called tax but end up being 40% of the total budget or other fees. And then the final bucket is federal match, federal investment. And so as you break down, some things that are in the general fund are less, even though those dollars are the most flexible, they're less flexible because you're trying to use those general fund dollars to maximize federal drawdowns and other investments that you can get return on. So yes, those monies are fungible, but only to the extent that you're maintaining current service level and other parameters. So can we do it? Yes, absolutely. We can spend money however we want to. And we could have a amendment to our budget process that says fund schools first. We could absolutely do that. We could put a specific percentage of the budget on it. We could do all sorts of things today, but you can't compel a future legislature. So every 2 years, you're going to start that process again.
And not to mention the black hole of PERS, right, Daniel?
So, I mean, it's a problem nationwide, though, Joe. So in Oregon right now, we have a public retirement system, a public employees retirement system, PERS, that is right now estimated to be about a $27 billion unfunded actuarial liability. But if you look at the federal government right now, and you look at Social Security and Medicare, I mean, you're talking about 150 trillion in unfunded actuarial liability. Like, everybody, man, woman, and child in the United States should know that if they had to pay their entire obligation to the nation right now, it's $460,000 per person to get us out of debt and to fund all of our obligation. So it's a significant amount of money that the federal government just continues to spend with no regard for conservatism, which, our party at some point is going to have to wake up and go back to our principles and say that we can't spend money that we don't have. And I don't know, when it comes to spending, I don't know that I can identify Republicans in Washington based on their track record.
Yeah. Real quick, I do want to highlight something in particular that's kind of an important differentiation between Alaska and Oregon and Washington and Colorado and everywhere else, specifically around the legalization of cannabis. So most of the states, especially Colorado, where they started it, because they led with the premise of a lot of that money going to drug and alcohol rehabilitation and treatment facilities and other things, especially for other drugs, but also for marijuana, people younger ages, teenagers, and people that get addicted to weed or have weed issues when they're young. And I thought that was always a really good thing. I think that a lot of other places like Washington, Oregon, and other places copy that. And, that's one of those designations of funds that he was kind of talking about. And in Alaska, they have legalized cannabis, but that money is not designated for anything. It literally just goes in the general fund, and then it's just used for whatever. And so in that conversation, I think it's kind of interesting to highlight the differences of the states and the way that they operate, and also even something as common as like cannabis and how it's similar across multiple state lines in regards to being legal. It is very different in the way that the money is being collected and the way that people spend it too. So in regards to this, I do want to look at, we have a couple other people on the Zoom call. I do want to give anybody that, if they want to raise their hand, if you would please just raise your hand if you want to ask any questions. And then at the end of this, I'm going to go ahead and give is it Bonham? Is that correct, sir? Okay, so I want to give Representative Bonham an opportunity to tell us about the last bit of, anything he wants to share. And then I'm going to give Joe with Conservative Wing a chance to share, and then give her a chance, and then go ahead and close it out for the evening, if that's okay with you guys. Yeah, it looks like we're good. We don't have any more questions. So, Representative Bonham, if you want to go ahead and start us off.
Oh, sorry. Needed some wonderful cherry 7-Up there. No, when Joe reached out to me and said, hey, we're going to have a conversation with the Conservative Wing, and it's a group he's trying to get up and going, and in fairness, needs some funding as well to kind of expand his movement. I said, for sure, I'll come visit, and I think it's an interesting conversation. First and foremost is, what is a conservative today, and I'm not sure that we all align even on what that definition is. You can say, what is a Republican today?
You're right back.
And I think, again, you're going to get a pretty wide swath of answers. There are folks that are close to our ideals, libertarians, that participated in a few elections that, in fairness, in the state of Oregon, cost us 2 seats. Having somebody run with an ideology that's pretty similar to ours on most fundamental levels. And so, how do we connect with people that are so close and ideal that they could be one of us and we could be one of them? And so, we have challenges here to make sure that our brand is known, that it's identifiable, and that we're connecting with those that could be allies in a meaningful way. We saw a Green Party candidate affect a race out on the coast. And I don't want to limit participation. Like, I think everybody that wants to run for office should. And, if we had 6 people with different party affiliations running in my next election, I'd be thrilled to have those debates and to engage in those conversations. And I think more options is actually better. But I think when it's only a single third-party candidate that peels from only one other party, that we should certainly know what the outcome is going to be. We will watch Ross Perot affect a presidential outcome twice. And so, we either need those minor parties to grow and to be real players, or we need to help them understand and support and coordinate. And we're just going to keep working on it. We're going to keep, raising awareness with what we're trying to do as Republicans here in Oregon, trying to restore balance, trying to restore a semblance of limited government back to the state of Oregon, trying to control growth of state spending and state influence. I think ultimately, fundamentally, I still believe that you, the individual, are the best person to determine where your investment is and where it goes and what you want to do with your life. I think should be up to you. And so we're going to continue to fight for those things. And it's going to be an interesting session this year. I don't know what to expect. We get sworn in on Monday, and I can't even tell you what that process is going to look like. I know we got an email today trying to outline it, but we don't know how many of us are going to be allowed in the chamber at once. There's still concerns over COVID and now security concerns with some of the national news stories that are out there. So looking forward to it, though. We're gonna be there. We're gonna fight hard and try and affect positive change in Oregon.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate your time, and again, I'd like to do this again. I like the plan. Maybe next time we'll do like shorter clips, but the opportunity to be able to have a conversation and be able to talk with you has been truly a pleasure. And I didn't know, you never know what to expect when you work with people, but this is one of my favorite conversations that I've had so far this year. I speak with mayor candidates, senators, House representative members all over the Pacific Northwest. So I speak with a lot of people, and you have a very good head on your shoulders, and I'm really impressed with everything you had to say today. So thank you again for your time. Joe, do you have anything you'd like to say about the conservative wing, sir?
Yeah, just leading off of what Daniel had to say, the conservative wing we want to organize and we want to stand up for Oregon. We want, the conservative ideals to be upheld. As you can see all over the nation, they're being silenced. I mean, look at what they did to Donald Trump today. Twitter shut him down permanently. Facebook shut him down permanently. Apple took the Parler app off of their platform. They're freezing things all over, and that just happened today. So, the fight has to come, and with the supermajority here in Oregon, there's not enough organizational side of things for the conservatives here in Oregon. So we wanted to create this organization with local people, grassroots people here to rise up and help find candidates that will stand up in Oregon and find ways to fight, because and it starts at the local level. The things that I'm seeing here in Gresham in our local government is just astonishing. I just got involved a year ago with my mayor race last year. I mean, I won this election cycle, but paying attention to everything that's going on in local politics is just, I can't believe it. And then you know, it kind of reflects off of everything that's going on nationally. So yeah, we want to fight. We don't want to move. I'm seeing so many people move out of Oregon right now because they're just sick of the overreach from the government. But we're here to organize. So if you want to help us out, you can go to theconservativewing.com, hit that donate button, and help us out. I'm also on PayPal at the Conservative Wing, Cash App, and Venmo.
And you have another meeting coming up here on the 20th, or what day is it? I forgot.
The 28th, yeah.
28th,
but
yeah.
we got a special speaker that is a Czech Republic guy. He wants to tell his life story, the things that he experienced with the Berlin Wall coming down, and the likely, you know, the things that are parallel to happening here in America right now with what he experienced growing up in the Czech Republic.
Wow, I didn't even know about that, so that's exciting.
Yeah, we're going to be pretty cool. We also have anticipations. We're in the works right now of getting bigger voices to draw attention to the conservative wing. Big conservative speakers like, you know, Dan
Hey,
Bonham.
represented Bonham today, so that was a
Yeah.
huge win. So that's already like right there at the top of the list of people. You know, you can't get much higher. I mean, it's like you can only go so high. Bert, with up there in Alaska, do you have anything you'd like to say, sir? Like, I'm sure you're going to share this on your page, so you know, we definitely want to get your insights.
Well, it's already been shared and being shared right now. Well, yeah, it's going to be an interesting new year for 2021. We thought that we had worked really hard during the primaries, during the general election, to eliminate a lot of the what we like to call nowadays rhinos and get them removed out of office. And now we're expecting and hoping to hear from the newest generation that just got voted into office and what the future is going to be. And what we got to witness today is the old generation, the past House Senate majority, gather together and start talking about how they're going to spend the future majority's money, which was a really interesting discussion, listening to them talk about the future of where the budget of the proposed budget that the governor had given out, and how they're just going to do what, from all appearances, what they've done now since the Governor Dunleavy has taken office. They're going to take his budget, they're going to pull a Nancy Pelosi, they're going to grab a hold of that budget, they're going to rip it into shreds, toss it into the trash can, and they're going to walk right back to the Walker budget and continue to push that progressive plan that they have of expanding our government services. It's the conservative movement here in Alaska really needs to start banding together and working as a unified front. I'm watching what happened during this election cycle, and it's clear we're very disenfranchised from each other. And I compare that to the Democrat Party, and I'm sure you guys experience it there in Oregon too, and Seattle is that it's a unified front on that end. And each individual fraction of it is working as one union. And then when you go to the Republican Party, and honestly, I'm a part of about probably 400 different groups here in Alaska, just trying to keep up on all the different little fractions out there. And majority of them, if you were to put them all into one room and find out we're all on the same page, we're just not working together to get there. And if you got any good insights in the future, I mean, my followers, myself, what we can do to work together to get us all joined together, and you down there in Oregon to work together as one big consolidated group and start standing up for one another. I mean, we could be one hell of an army going out there. I mean, this didn't need to be storming of the Capitol. This could have been easily sitting there and women ripping off of their bras and men ripping off of their shirts to prove a point that we're here peacefully to let you know what we think about what the future is going to be here in our state. I got one follower that did ask a question though, and he said, how much money is going to go to the private individuals to pay for homeless care? Who are those private individuals that this money is going to take care of the homeless? And how much do they continue to contribute to the politicians? On the Alaska level, I'm going to address this question as you brought up one of the key senators out there, Senator Natasha von Imhoff, and her family and the Rasmussen Foundation. that there's a private individual right there, so to speak. The Rasmussen Foundation is their own private entity. They are capitalizing on the state and capital budget. They received millions, hundreds of millions of dollars out of the CARES Act funding. And our cities contributed even more to them, Anchorage especially, with their homeless program that they got going on. And so there's one private organization who happens to sit as the leader of the finance committee the last 2 years, as a private individual, as a senator, whose family as a private individual and representative out there for themselves are profiting all of these nonprofits off of our tax dollars, off of our hard work, and no accountability for it.
Well, in a lot of ways, this goes back to Supreme Court Justice Alito, and he talked about rule by expert, and the sense that we didn't hire these people to do this job, and yet they are now, as experts, ruling and controlling money, millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's across all states, especially liberal states, but like Anchorage and Portland and Seattle are going to have very large prevalence of unionized labor, and one of the big things that you see, and you'll see it going forward in Portland, Anchorage, and in Seattle, is the liberal city councils or liberal politicians pushing against the police unions. These at one point were like their best friends, and at this point now they are against them. They want to defund these people, and so going forward, you're going to see more unionized labor potentially being targets by the Democratic Party. And so, as a group, we also need to reach out to the people on the other side, on the union side, and let them know that maybe the union bosses and the politicians don't really have their back like they claim.
Agreed.
Okay, we got to let Daniel bounce here, so I want to give a shout out to Impact Studios and Philip. I don't know your last name, but Daniel wanted to know. And Daniel, I really appreciate your time today. I know you got to bounce,
thank you guys all for your time. I really appreciate it. Yeah, absolutely. And Joe, thanks for getting us all together. Representative Bonham, thank you so much for your time. I'll shoot you a private message with information that you if you need anything. All right, have a good one, guys.
Yeah, good night.
Thank you for having me. All right, everybody. If you're still out there watching in Facebook land, let's see where I got the camera sitting at this time. I did this a little bit earlier today, and I found that I was not in my headshot, that I was well below where I needed to be sitting to be able to see my head. And looks like I'm doing a little bit better on the camera angle this time. I'll put it up just a hair there. We were with Is Anchorage Dying? I do really appreciate them inviting us to be a part of the conversation today, to bring some of the highlights of what had happened here in Alaska with our Alaska legislator, with our homeless problem, how Oregon is similar to what we're dealing with here in their legislative sessions and their problems there. They're a lot more blue than what we are and have been for a long time. And it's unfortunate to see what is happening, what happens here in Oregon and in Seattle, how closely they mirror each other as our legislative body continues to change. If you listen to the discussion that was given earlier today about the state and capital budget for the fiscal year 2021 and 2022, the proposed budget, and the House majority and their conversations that they had with their paid for setup, we've got an agenda presentators for how they want to be able to spend our money. The entire discussion was about how to take the rest of the PFD and not pay the full amount. Taxes, and more taxes, from education tax to a income tax to a statewide tax. You name the tax, they mentioned it. Nowhere during the conversation in the 2 hours that they talked earlier today did they discuss anything about new revenue, as in expanding oil, expanding the timber sales, getting minerals being extracted out of the ground, as in mining. You name the resource, expanding the fishing, taking more control away from China and places like that have been overfishing the waters and bringing that income back into the state again. None of that was discussed at all. And will include cutting the budget. There was no discussion of cutting the budget. They just put the same sore items that they always put up there, the ones that always causes the biggest outrage, and said, this is all the governor said we were to cut. The governor never said that. The governor gave him an open opportunity to look at all budgets and cut them. And here's their prime chance to be able to do it. What was really disgusting about the session that they had earlier today with their discussions about the new budget is watching the old guard, the past House majority, not the current soon-to-be House majority. We were listening to people like Jennifer Johnson, who was elected out and is no longer a representative in the House anymore, but she was a part of the conversation, and she was steering her portion of the conversation towards how much money can we steal from the PFD to pay for it all. Really do appreciate you guys all watching tonight. Don't forget to like and share this video. Alaskans need to know what's going on. It was kind of interesting to participate in this event tonight. Wasn't quite what I was expecting, but I'm not disappointed. Again, thank you all for being here. Go to my website, www.politadick.com. Click that donate button. Every cent goes right back into improving our content to you, making it possible to do these live Zoom events. Making sure that we have the microphones that are able to pick up the conversation so that we come in loud and clear for you. Computers that actually have the ability to live stream these events to you. And our next big thing that we want to connect into is we want to be able to start live streaming to all social media channels throughout the platforms that are out there, whether it be Twitter, VMO, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. We want to be able to launch, when we go with a live broadcast, we want to be able to live broadcast to all of these platforms at the exact same time. We have looked into the cost of being able to do this. We need to get, we'll say, 7 people out there to be willing to donate $10 a month to us. If we could get 7 of our followers out there to donate just $10 a month, we'd be able to start live streaming to all of these platforms at the exact same time and make it possible so that we're reaching a much larger audience each time we go live. Again, thank you all for being here. Don't forget to share. Good night.